Good evening, everyone. We welcome you back. We are starting our session on education. The first speaker who is with us is Dr. Rukmini Banerji, CEO of Pratham Education Foundation. Dr. Rukmini Banerji is Chief Executive Officer of Pratham Education Foundation and has been a Pratham for 25 years. Trained as economist in India, Dr. Rukmini Banerjee completed her BA at Std College and attended the Delhi School of Economics. She was a Rhodes Scholar at Oxford University and earned her PhD at the University of Chicago. Dr. Banerjee worked as a program officer at Spencer Foundation in Chicago for several years before returning to India in 1996 to join Pratham as a part of a leadership team. Then she led the organization research assessment efforts, which has included the internationally acknowledged Annual Status of Education report since 2005 and served as director of ASER Centre in New Delhi for 10 years. In 2008, Dr. Banerjee was inaugural recipient of Maulana Abul Kalam Shiksha Puraskar award conferred by the Government of Bihar, India. Over the years, she has represented Pratham and the ASER Centre in various national and international forums and is a member of committees both in India and abroad. She writes frequently on education in India and enjoys creating books and stories for children. I would request Dr. Rukmini Banerji ma'am to take over. And I would request you to take the session for 40 minutes so that we'll have a 20 minutes Q&A for the audience. Thank you. Please take on.
So, thank you very much for inviting me. And like it happens in schools, that after the midday meal, we have a little bit of a dropout. So I'm glad to see that even in institutions of higher education, the same happens. We can pretend in today's age that everybody's online. They're just not here. But for all those of you who are here and didn't drop out, I'm very grateful that we can spend some time together. I actually have a presentation which I am going to do because I want to see the reactions from all of you. But as Dr. Mahapatra, when he was talking, and he said, I'll tell a story. If I had to summarize this entire last almost 1 year in the form of a visual, and I've been trying to do it, but I'm not particularly good at animation. But I'm going to try it on you and tell me whether this creates an image. So the way I would describe it is that, let's say, before COVID happened, there were two clear institutions. One was called school and one was called home. And if you think of a white page like this, the school was at one end of the picture and the home was at the other end. School is a familiar thing. It has building, it has rooms, it has a gate, ghanti bajti hai, people go in. Then when they go in, they sit in rows and columns. There is a blackboard, you know what I'm saying, right? There's an exam. It's all very well organized. I can't see people here, so I'm standing this side. Home and the school is where all the education is supposed to happen. And there are textbooks and there are exams, and these are all the paraphernalia which goes with school. Home is at the other end, and the home, by the time we reach 2020, home's involvement in this whole business is also very clear. Get up in the morning, get ready, comb your hair, hopefully, go to school. That's the job of home. So in many ways, if you look at the literature on education, schooling is supposed to be initiated from there and up to the building. And then whatever is called learning, it happens inside this building. So then what happens if one part of this just shuts down and there are restrictions on where you can go? And I think we have been all forced in different ways into figuring out how to fill up that blank white space. Now, unlike in health, which is clearly, needs a lot more, sophisticated inputs, I think the interesting thing about education was wherever people were and whatever they could do, they started doing. And so, between what could happen on the ground and what could happen in the air and who could participate, I think that whole space actually got crowded in a way that it wasn't before. Now I'm looking for a good animator who can, kind of draw this, because it presents a lot of opportunities. And it presents opportunities, I think, in many fundamental ways. Because with anything else, I think even in education, there is how is education done? Who does it? Where does it happen? When does it happen? And I think during these last 10 months, all of that was happening in ways that were different. And maybe to call it education is going too far, but efforts to reach children, to do something with them, I think happened in a much bigger way by a lot more people than what was happening before. So, whether it's SMS, WhatsApp, online, offline, textbook, we did the ASER survey this year out of sync because that's what it was needed. It was a phone survey of almost 120,000 households across India. And we found that for the first time, we were looking at what is happening in the household as far as we've been measuring outcome for a long time. And this time we tried to measure bits of process. And what we saw is that many different kinds of efforts, maybe disorganized, maybe not effective, but many different cast of characters, even uneducated parents giving time for something that the children could do. And what came out of that picture, and if you're interested, you can look at the ASER report, is I think that while the whole world is talking about digital and online, I think what came through from the data was that some traditional things came to the fore. Some traditional things are family, some traditional things are mohalla, some traditional things are bade bhai bahan. These all, with whatever resources there were, I think tried to do what they could. The government, all governments, not just Bihar government, did one very important thing, which for some unknown reason they don't talk about, which is that they distributed textbooks. Textbooks are the most familiar thing related to education that even uneducated parents know. So by the time we did the ASER survey in September, 85% across the country of children had textbooks of their current grade in their hand. We know from previous ASER surveys that less than 20% of rural households have anything for children to read other than textbooks. So really, it's the only material that's out there, and the government managed to deliver it to 250 million children. But for some reason, governments don't talk about these things. Instead, they talk about online education, which reached only 10% children. So I think that in very fundamental ways, there are opportunities. I don't think what happened in the last 10 months can be called education. But then you may also say what was happening before perhaps was not education either, right? But it was traditional. It was, you could recognize the features of it. What has happened now is quite different. So as Pratham, we have been sending, and the number varies from month to month, week to week, something like 3 lakh messages a day to 3 lakh households across India. And largely 60% of these are SMS messages. And when we realize that for the children at whom we work, WhatsApp even is not really the main method to send it, then the question became that in 160 characters, what can you send that actually can be used at the other end? And we got into a lot of sort of analyzing. Of course, firstly, we learned that in different scripts, that character limit is different. You also have to operate under the free limit for every person every day because we had not budgeted for these kinds of things. Anyway, net, what we realized that even in a very, very short message, you can actually create it such that there is a whole bunch of activities to do. I'll give you an example. And if somebody wants to write it down, you can even count the characters. Take a piece of thread that's 30 centimeters. I mean, I won't say take a piece of thread, say take thread 30 centimeters. How many shapes can you make with it? Measure the size, name the shape, make a list. This actually, if you break it down, there are 6 or 7 activities that you can do just with this. And again, this is just as an example that we had not thought about how do you communicate in a way that parents who are not very educated can understand and put in it activities that actually are multi-age. But this is something that anybody can do. Is this education, is this not education, can be debated. But I think that it has taught a lot of people different kinds of methods of how you can reach out. And so if I look at my picture again, I think it's full of a lot of activity, maybe not very systematic, maybe not very effective, but a lot of people who have experienced what it means. I think anybody in this room, you all look very young, so probably don't have children. But if you have children, you too now know exactly what is in chapter 7 and who is coming online and why not, and which Mrs. Sharma is scolding the children. You knew all those things you didn't know before, right? And so this involvement is not always, that you reached out, it happened to you. Question really now that is standing in front of, I think, all education systems is what shall we do with this experience? Shall we just put it aside and say it was a scary time and so we did what we did? We all know that we are we manage disasters well, we manage events well. Kumbh Mela is one of the best managed events. Go to Allahabad at any other time, it's the worst place. So we know we are a very schizophrenic country, that we behave very well sometimes and really badly at other times. And Development Management Institute should analyze the psychology of this behavior, why we behave like this. Even from what Tanmay was saying, it sounded a bit like that as well, that under this high pressure, a lot of things happen which were not happening otherwise. So challenge, I think, is what are we going to do next? And does all of these things that happen just be put away till the next disaster comes? Or are we going to learn from that? If we are going to learn from that, who is the we and how shall we learn? Because, I have what I will say to you now, we discussed with the government as well, and I'm very keen to see what they do next. Because across governments in India, we work with quite a few. It's very interesting the reactions they have. 10 months schools have been closed. Surely we should have had a plan by now for what we want to do when schools open. So scrambling in the month of February seems not a good management strategy for what has been the biggest break in your normal scheme of business. But that's what it looks like in many places, that you're so unused to such a big break, you're so used to business as usual, that despite all that activity which happened outside the school, where many people could react immediately, but as a system, you're very stodgy. And now how will the system respond to what is to be done, I think I'm going to put some things out here and I'm keen to see whether you guys buy it or not. I think this, right? So I don't keep very good track of time, so you should tell me when I'm okay? I just use this. Okay. Hi, you do it? Okay. So not only did we have COVID, we also had a new education policy come out at this time. And I think actually that was a good thing, because what the new education policy is saying many things. But the things that I think are fundamental are very much in line with what I think needs to be done. So if you look at the broad context, and I've of course conveniently picked out the things from the education policy that I think are important, but I think these are pretty important things. They are saying several things, one of which is saying focus on foundational skills. Basic reading, basic arithmetic has to be built in primary school. And if you're familiar with the ASER report, for 15 years, that is what that report has been saying. And so naturally, we are very pleased that finally this is part of a major thrust in the new education policy, including somewhere in the document, there's a box which says, if you don't achieve this, then the rest of the policy is irrelevant. So I'm going to make a big poster of that and hang it, on billboards everywhere. The second thing is this big focus being given to the early years, and to think about this early years from 3 to 8 as a continuum. So if you do things right in the beginning, then many of the problems that you see later will not happen. And in some ways, this framing is actually very convenient for what needs to be done right now. So I picked out 4 things in the case of Bihar that I think need to be thought about, in some depth. One is that, and these are the 4 things. How do we bring everybody back to school? Because Bihar in the last 10 years has seen a massive growth of enrollment, particularly of girls. And I'll show you some numbers on that. How do we not let the last 10 years of performance get diluted by what has happened now? Secondly, what do we do with the young children? Because there is a new opportunity to have a much more well worked out strategy to bring them up to the primary school stage. Third is what do we do for children third and beyond, where situation was already not great before the pandemic, perhaps has become worse. And finally, going back to my right slide, which is now full of people, what are you going to do with all these actors? Are you going to just push them aside and shut the school door? Or are you going to open the windows and doors and invite them in? I think these are some 4 key things that the government has to think about. And I'm hoping that Sanjay ji is not coming because he's thinking about these things. Okay. You can ask him if he's thinking about this or not. Okay. So we'll plant some questions in the audience. Okay, if we go to the next slide. So just a few, what I've done is I've pulled out some numbers from existing data, largely on ASER, and also some experiences. We've been working in Bihar for many years. My own home state is Bihar, so we do more research studies and more work in Bihar than in some of the other states. But just to look at what do trends tell us and where does that bring us today. So if you go to the next slide, this is trying to capture in when Nitish Kumar became chief minister for the first time, 2005 or 6, I forget, or 4, around that time, 6. Bihar had the largest, one of the states with the largest out-of-school children in the country. They had had no recruitment of teachers for a long time. And in his early first and second term, education, especially school education, was a high priority. And in those early years, I remember every single public meeting, he would mention girls and school, going to school. You can see it in the numbers. And what I've done is I've pulled out for 2006, which is ASER, first or second year of ASER, the states which had higher than 10% of girls in this 11 to 14 age group out of school. And you can see those numbers. Bihar is at number 2 behind Rajasthan. UP is much lower, but they lie about their numbers. So that's why it's a little bit lower than it should be. And we look at the massive change that they were able to do in a short period of time. The reason to show this is to say that this system, with all its weaknesses, was able to bring a massive transformation. And it's true that it was on enrollment and not on learning, but still going from almost 1 out of 5 children being out of school to only 1 out of 10, and then soon only, whatever the number is here, quickly is something that the system did with its existing resources. So it is a system that is capable of massive change in a short period of time. And for those who are familiar with Bihar, this was a time when the leadership was very stable and the education people were given a free hand to get this done. And having worked in districts at that time, I know that it was very aligned. The goals were very aligned from top to bottom. There were reviews all the time. And you had political will, which in every public pronouncement, the chief minister would say कि लड़कियों को स्कूल जाना बहुत जरूरी. It was also in a context where other things were happening. So it was not just a girls going to school campaign happening alone. There was panchayat reservation. There was recruitment within the para teachers of 50% women. There was cycles that were being given. So there was a whole other supportive strategy for achieving a number of goals related to women, of which this was perhaps the most visible one. So we know how to do this in Bihar. We know how to do it when all forces are together and there's a clear goal and you're being driven by that goal. I don't know where to find numbers like this for places outside India. I wouldn't be surprised if this is the biggest enrollment that children remained enrolled over, in such a short period of time. If you go to the next one, this is data from DICE, which is the usual government source of data. And this is enrollment in 8th standard for boys and girls. And I don't know whether you can see the numbers far back there, but you can see the colors. So the green was girls and the blue was boys. And you can see over time, not just that all the bars have become much higher, but that the green bar has become higher than the blue. So this, in the last 10 years, practically every girl in Bihar is reaching up to 8. And in 10 years ago, hardly 1 out of 5 reached there. So again, this is not as dramatic as the first one that I showed you, but this is a continued progress year on year on year. And this, I think, is something that has to be protected when schools open again. I would love if the chief minister would announce that come July 1, every single girl in this graph is back in my school, And not only that, she's doing better than she did before. Because I think it's actually possible to do. So this has to be kept in mind. However, we also know that attendance levels in Bihar are not high. Bihar is one of the lowest daily attendance rates in India. About 60% of children are in school on any given day. This number has been very steady over the years. So efforts have to be made, because these are just, I remember asking a child in third or fourth in one of the districts, in the school board, they write Namankan and then they write Upasthiti. So I said, Namankan kya hota hai? And I got the best definition ever of enrollment. One kid said, uska matlab hota hai ki mera naam aa gaya hai school mein. Aur main kabhi kabhi aata hu. So we have to have this kabhi kabhi aata hu to come every day, so that Namankan and Upasthiti are the same thing. And I'm looking forward to the day when nobody has to write Namankan anymore, because it really doesn't mean anything. Upasthiti is all that counts. So there's a lot of work to be done on that, but the base is there. You know who the girls are, you know who the boys are, you know where they are. And you have to do something in the school, especially now that school's open, to make sure that they come. Many ideas are there, we can go into them later, but this is a big challenge, because there's no point in moving into learning unless everybody is more or less there every day. And again, this is a time to reopen this chapter in a new way. I was telling Sanjay ji today in the morning that COVID has done many bad things. But one thing is कि हमारे सामने एक राक्षस को खड़ा कर दिया है. अब हम blame सब चीज के लिए COVID को कर सकते हैं. The other day in my house I lost my keys and somebody asked me where are the keys. I said, "वो COVID खा गया." So I think the past history can almost be wiped out by saying every bad thing we see today is COVID, which opens up a lot of opportunities, because I don't want to blame anybody. वो पिछले शिक्षा सचिव ने काम क्यों नहीं किया, फलाने हेडमास्टर कैसा था, forget all that. Your history can begin 15th of February and move up, forwards. So this is the story on what we have been able to achieve and what needs to be done to secure the achievements of the past 10 years. If you go to the next one, I'm going a little bit in the wrong order. I should go to younger children first, but I want to do this one. So what was the situation with basic learning in the last so many years? If we go to the next slide, this is basically ASER data on the ASER tool. The highest level is, can you read a story of this type, which is roughly a second standard level text. And the line that you can see is what percentage of children in standard 5 can read at least at this level. And you see that Bihar was well above. The number even in 2008 was at 60% or 63%. But Bihar was substantially around the national average. Over time, learning levels have declined both in India and in Bihar, but they have declined faster in Bihar. And today, Bihar is substantially lower. So look at where they were in 2008 and look at where we are in 2018. We can have a whole symposium on why this has happened. But I think more importantly is what are we going to do as we move ahead. But it's important to remember that this was a scenario before COVID. And so this lifting up of the curve has to be done across the country and has to be done even more so in Bihar. So you go to the next one, which we can now analyze a little bit closer. Basically, this is the basic ASER levels are like this. Can you recognize letters? Can you recognize words? Can you read 4 lines, which is like a standard 1 level text? And the highest is, can you at least read at the second standard level? So if I take the blue cell, which is kids in standard 3 who are reading, who are let's say at grade level, in 2018 in Bihar, 12% kids were at grade level. Which means that if you take the third standard textbook and आप उससे पढ़ाएं, तो 100 minus 12 को कोई फायदा नहीं होने वाला. So a rational response should be that if I want to reach, so there are 2 responses. One is I want to focus on the excellent and just move with them till they get to IIT and to DMI, etc. Then continue with the practice that we have. But if you really want education for all, then you have to dump the textbooks you have because they were made for some other planet and do something different. Then come up to 5th. In 5th standard, I I can assure from the ASER report that 35% children can at least read basic things. Now, in the government right now, not just in this government, but in others as well, people are saying, थोड़ा syllabus को light कर देंगे. Fifth का बच्चा है ना, उसको थोड़ा सा fourth का पढ़ा देंगे. But will that work? Because what we see here is that 35% are, let's say, at least at a basic reading level, second standard level, or even above. 16% who are still at standard 1 level. We are talking about fifth standard children. And rest are below first standard level, but they have spent 5 years in school. And this situation is likely to have become a little worse now that they have not been in school for so long, and because a large number of children in Bihar have parents who are very aspirational but can't really help things too much. So this, just simply this table indicates that you have to quit business as usual. You should have done it long ago. And even if you didn't do it long ago, now use COVID as an excuse and focus on this whole yellow range to bring them up where they can at least read things, they can at least begin to engage. Grade level may be much further away, but basic reading and basic arithmetic, and that's exactly what the national education policy is saying. Because clearly there, they must have seen numbers like this and other things to say that that is what the country needs. So as we get into, let's go to the next slide. So I did one more thing, and I did this because I thought I'm coming to an education institution of very high standing, so I should show you more numbers. So what I did is, and this is the logic, I want somebody to argue with me so I can see if I can hold my own. What is a normal year? What happens in normal years? Because this year is an abnormal year. But we should think what happens in a normal year so that we can plan up or down based on that. So this is, the numbers, I'll tell you the important numbers if you can't see them at the back. So we've taken, and ASER is the only annual year-on-year data on basic learning. So what I've done is I've pulled out data for different cohorts. So let's say the cohort which was in standard 2 in 2000, or let's say the group that was in standard, let's say 2 in 2012 was in standard 8 in 2018, and so on and so forth. So the colors are cohorts as they're going through the system. And basically what we see is, depending on the year, depending on the grade, depending on the cohort, anywhere in the lower box, I've kind of tried to mark it out. There is anywhere between annual improvement in the level of reading, 8 to 17 percentage points. That's the normal year in Bihar for the last so many years. Now, what if you did a very focused effort? Has there been evidence of focused efforts? And if you did focused efforts, what would you get? So we pulled out, we've been working with Bihar government in 2 different ways. One is with the school system in 13 districts, and one is with the Tola Sevaks, who are in the Mahadalit Tolas in about 9 districts. Working on putting the curriculum aside, but what is called teaching at the right level, which is a method that we use, for which various people won Nobel Prize as well, for having evaluated those. Some of those evaluations were actually done in Bihar. But what you see is that depending on how much time and what you did, you can see in the school system, in a period of about 8 months, and instructional days maybe only about 15 days a month, given all the changes, you see an improvement of almost 30%, 30 percentage points, which is in, let's say, a much shorter period of time, higher than what you achieve in an average year. If I look at the Tola Sevaks who worked harder, that percentage point improvement is higher. So the argument that I'm trying to present to anybody who will listen, and that's why I decided to come here and not do it on Zoom, because I feel it's more convincing to say it in person, is that if you put aside your business as usual and focused on building the basics and did it in a very aligned way, like you did when you were bringing children to school, there is a chance that Bihar could come back much stronger. And come back much stronger, but it can only be done if you create the space for doing that. So if you think that schools open, let's say 1st of March, or let's say even 1st of April, and wait till maybe 1st of August, use this period to really do this building of basics, because then it is conceivable that you may be able to come back better than you would have if schools had actually been opened last year. Now, somehow people, despite looking at evidence, find this difficult to believe. And somehow the natural reaction is just to go back to business as usual. There is a study from Pakistan, which was done to study the medium-term effects of the Pakistan earthquake, which happened in 2005. And these researchers went back, I think, 5 years later. And they looked at a whole bunch of indicators of the affected area, health, livelihoods, education. Almost everything had come back to pre-earthquake levels except for children's learning. And they attribute the fact that the children's learning was still lower, not to the fact that school was closed, but to the fact that when schools opened, you were in a hurry to cover up and do business as usual. So it's a very critical decision, I think, that we have in front of us, but how we can do what is required right now and not fall back on what I would call, inappropriate practices of many years. Question will be, do we have the political will to do so? I made the same argument on Monday in Punjab. Could be that they're going into an election year. They felt this is the only thing to be done. And let's see what happens after these kinds of discussions here, whether Bihar has the courage. There's a new education minister as of 2 days ago. But what is the thinking about what we are going to do to get back? I also make the argument, if money is going to be spent, it should be spent on health. Because clearly there's a long way to go in health. This is a question of priority because you have teachers, you have schools, you have 10 years worth of material in your cupboards. What you need is focus and priority. And it will be a shame if this challenge is not taken. So let me go on. How to do it, I don't want to bore you with how it can be done. These are various ways. Let's go to the young children. Next one. I don't know, she's left the room, so now I can speak for a long time. But I won't. Now, the new education policy says that think about children from age 3 to 8 and make whatever arrangements for them. Budget doesn't give you much money for doing that, but this is the education policy, right? So what should we do in Bihar? So this is age distribution from 3 to 8. And based on the 2018 survey, and since she went out, I get 5 extra minutes. So where are the children aged 3 to 8? And, there are lots of options. You can go to Anganwadi, you can go to, even in Bihar, about 25% children go to private kinds of things. Even in rural areas, you can go to LKG, UKG, private, government, you can't because there's no government LKG, UKG in Bihar. You can go to first standard, which a lot of underage children go when their parents are very keen that they should go to school. So पहले से ही उनको स्कूल में डाल दो. शहरों में तो लोग बच्चों को स्कूल में डाल देते हैं, तो हम भी वैसे करें. And so this is what the picture looks like. Key things are that in Bihar for age 3 and 4, a substantial chunk are still out of Anganwadi. And for those of you who are familiar with the field, you know that very often in a village you need 4 Anganwadis, but there's only 1. So you can see that here as well. Look at age 5. In age 5 in Bihar, children are all over different kinds of institutions. So if we are going to do the new education policy, we'll have to think about where children are the best place to be at what age. And given whatever resources we have here, how are we going to ensure that they have the right kind of readiness before they come into standard 1? Bihar has had 2 interesting, the other wonderful thing about government is there is no memory. It's always only the present. And this year, at least there's a COVID, so we can look back a little bit. But Bihar has had, I can say all this because Mr. Kumar is not here. So he's also new in education. So Bihar has had 2 actually interesting experiments, which were not very successful. But I think it's worth revisiting them to see what out of them could have worked better. One is, like what the new education policy says, in some schools in Bihar, they had a bal bug. In my time, it used to be called a kachi class. Before you come to pakki class, you spend some time in a kachi class. And that's what really pre-primary should be. So they were bal bug, but there were no appointed teachers for that. And yet, if you don't have that, then you are coming sometimes underage, but certainly underprepared when you come into Standard 1. Also, about 8 years ago, they did a move to have a designated teacher for Standard 1. Nobody likes Standard 1. बच्चे आते हैं, रोते हैं, घर जाना चाहते हैं, उनकी मम्मियां भी आती हैं, वो भी रोती हैं. It's a very mess in Standard 1. So the good teachers all sit in class 5, class 8, and whichever hapless para teacher they have, they put them in Standard 1. And usually stay away from them because that whole khichdi, you don't want to be part of. And yet we know that if you do that well, so Bihar government actually took a stance to designated निर्धारित teacher होगा for Standard 1, and उनको अलग से training दी गई थी. But I think it was not followed up. And I visited several districts during this time. I would go into the training and there would be people roughly around this time. I would say, आपको कैसा लगता है कि आपको निर्धारित टीचर बनाया गया है? Across the board, people would say, बहुत मुश्किल काम है. क्यों हमें इसमें डाला गया? So probably less than training, they needed motivation. You are the beginning and the end of education in Bihar. And Chief Minister should be showering rose petals from helicopters on them. We didn't do that. We just said, "Aaj training, mein TADA leke ghar chale jao." So that's what they did, and that this thing I think ran out of steam. But it's worth going back to say something must have worked there. It's worth going back to that. So next, this is just to say that if you come to school at a younger age, it actually puts you at a disadvantage for the rest of your schooling life. Because if you are under 5 and you're in first standard, you're developmentally not ready to deal with whatever our current first standard curriculum allows. First standard curriculum currently, aisa kyun hai, that's a whole other story. But whatever it is, the older you are, whether you're in government or private, and just if you look at the table on that side, you can see that in private schools, there is a much larger proportion of older children going into first. Unko rok lete hain. This LKG, UKG is a way of making you get ready before you move into first. Government school mein LKG, UKG nahi hai. So parents who have high aspirations for their children and low money say कि young बच्चा को उसको first में डालो, which creates a kind of for the rest of your life a disadvantage because you just started too early and you're going to be promoted year on year. So what shall we do about all of this here? Just to the next slide. Main thing to remember is kids who are going to go into Standard 2 this year actually have never been to school. Because first standard to hua hi nahi. Children who are going to go into Standard 1, at least 50% used to go to Anganwadi. Wo bhi nahi hua hai. So you have this lot who are going to start school. And clearly opening a second standard textbook for these kids would be, somebody should go to High Court to say this is against child rights, to do this to children. But this is a serious problem. And interestingly, not much has been thought about in different states also about this. Whereas it's a fact that is in front of everyone, that we know that children will be in second standard with nothing, and children in first standard also with nothing. And so what is the prescription that, the recommendation that we are doing is, don't worry about first and second. Do a massive school readiness campaign, which brings in all the things that you do in preschools, like, sort of classification, sequencing, a lot of oral activity, Ghana, having fun, introduce an element of play, because there's enough research to say that if you've had a lot of cognitive activity exposure, that actually helps you later. But this also means you have to put aside your Standard 1 and 2 as you knew it. You have to probably go to Anganwadi and say, aap jo karte hai, wo hame karna hai, which is a big, you can't go from a school to an Anganwadi and say, you guys know better. That's a big convergence, dur ki baat hai, it's a hierarchy thing. But I think that's actually what is needed. You almost need good Anganwadi teachers to say, do the activities like this. Do we have the courage to do that? Let's see whether we can. So she's still not telling me to stop, so I'm going to go on. Bihar has, just if we go on, just we can go through these are all things that we think should happen, but go on. The point has been made. Bihar has several important organized activities that are happening in the community. One is this whole Tola Sevak appointed in the Mahadalit Tolas. They were appointed and they are paid for by the education system for providing extra help to children. But if you look at what they do, for example, I just heard today that they have all been put on duty for panchayat elections. Now, all democracy is very important. We should have proper elections. But given the challenges that we have with our children, should they be running panchayat elections or should they be working with the children in their tola? And again, having worked with a lot of the districts with tola savers, we have about 25,000 tola sevaks, 25,000 or so Mahadalit tolas in Bihar. If you were able to raise the level of education, if you were able to raise attendance and learning there, I think a large part of the big problems would be gone. So even if you do whatever you want to the rest of the system, if these 30,000 people who have been given 1,000 rupees extra this year because they are going to do panchayat elections, people should win elections however they win them. Let these people focus on their job in hand, and I think we could have a major. I don't want to talk about Jivika. There's a lot of interesting things that Jivika structures could do. Bala is coming, I think, tomorrow to do it. But these are between Jivika and the Tola Sevaks. These are not structures that are there in any other state. And therefore, going back to my picture of many people helping, if you have organized structures in the community, how can you leverage them in this time of return to really use their strength to support what the school system does? So I'm going to stop there to say that these are some opportunities. I think today Bihar presents very strong opportunities based on past evidence, based on past experiences. But who will drive the decision making to be able to take decisions which have to be totally out of the box? So let me stop. I hope there are no questions. Everybody agrees completely with me. No, I love questions. Yeah.
What is the out of box thinking?
So out of box thinking is put away your textbooks. That's the out of box thinking. But everything we do in education is kitab se padhao, right? Or you will have to say there are textbooks which are sequentially arranged. But आपको शायद आप पांचवी में हो, but आपको शायद पांचवी की किताब की जरूरत नहीं है. We need to start where the child is and move further. So that's one for the older children. And there is enough evidence to show that if you do that, if you teach at the right level, you make significant jumps in children's basic learning. There is evidence from Bihar. There are randomized controlled trials that have been done in Bihar always. But you have to believe that evidence and go with the gut feel of when you see kids who are struggling, it's not just that they can read, not read or do math. It is also by fifth, you've reached a massive lack of self-confidence. Because you are supposed to do such certain things, but you can't. So this basic foundation is not just for literacy and numerals. It's actually for building a child's faith in themselves that they can progress. And coming after this bad period, I think that positive energy is very needed at the child level, at the teacher level, at the parent level, that we are now back and we can make big progress. It's like when you learn to ride a bike. Everybody can see you gir rahe ho, and suddenly nahi gir rahe. And that gives confidence to everyone. You see kids when they learn to walk. And when kids at home learn to walk, everybody takes credit. Right? Actually, nobody has been involved. But these are the things, it has to be a visible change. It has to be something that makes everybody feel good. We've come through a really bad time. And even if you spend a year maybe not adding to learning, you have to do something that energizes the system and makes it feel that I can do much more. So these are, I think, that's the out of the box. Checklist ले लो, अभी आज के पेपर में है कि पूरा टीचर का फोर्स जाके घर टू घर सर्वे कर देगा. I mean, they've done thousands of surveys before. Every teacher saying, "Hey, Bhagwan, फिर से वही करना पड़ेगा." But this year, you could have done other things for the same purpose. So how do we not fall back on things that have sort of been in the system and we sort of do that? So as the leading think tank of Bihar, we have to push. सबकी जिम्मेवारी है.
Ma'am, I have a question. First of all, thank you so much for this interesting presentation, which forced us to remain, attentive, and at the same time, we could laugh a lot. So thank you so much for that. I am wondering, you're talking about children who like who completely lost their school and learning during the COVID period. But there has been a group of children, like your ASER report has also been saying about 38% or so who are at par with the standard they are in. So like I'm just thinking, like you were suggesting, it's really good, but when we are trying to take along those children who suffer, what about these children who are able to maintain? So I'm just like,
so I'd say that just common sense. At home, there is a bunch of kids. When a kid gets sick at home, where does the parents' attention go? It's not like they don't love the healthy children, but they think it's for a time ke liye, they'll manage. Let me put my focus on the kid who really needs my help now. The children who are doing fine, who are at grade level, in all likelihood, if I take out the ASER data already, other data, who have educated parents, they probably have resources at home. And once you can actually read, you can do a lot on your own as well. But when you can't do that, you need instructional support. So in a way, I think we have to design, your question is exactly right. We have to design how to engage those children, keep them moving, but enable them to do it themselves. Whereas the children, so if there's a teacher and she has, 3 kids like that and 6 kids like this, she has to think about what can I give to those 3 kids that they can do it themselves, maybe together or otherwise. And, what should I do with the 6? But today what she does is, the Right to Education Act says complete the syllabus by this year. Inspection में के लिए जब लोग आते हैं, they say कि कहाँ कौन सा chapter पढ़ा रहे हो? They don't say कि उस बच्चे को पढ़ना क्यों नहीं आता है, right? So I think it's a question of how long will this take? I think if you put your minds to it, according to my projections, 100 days would give you a big boost. 100 days is not a long time. And anyway, even the time at which COVID happened, the time at which we have come out of this, anyway, in most of India, including Bihar, children move into their new class in April. फिर वो textbook आते सब कुछ होते गर्मी की छुट्टी हो जाती है. And really studying in some formal form starts in July. So we have April, May, June. We have March as well. How are we going to use these months? When budgets are made, when government comes in the middle, they do an interim budget. Why can't we do an interim plan till the 1st of July and then have a plan after that? And in July, look at who is still not, where we want them to be and work on that the next. See, she wants me to stop now. Yes.
Yeah, this is.
Yes.
Couple of things, basically, when I'm looking at your data, one of the things that which we are seeing is the children are getting promoted, but their learning skills are not improving. Have you done any correlation with what kind of teacher trainings have been provided to the teachers? What kind of infrastructure improvements that have happened, and how are these improvements in other facilities or infrastructure or in terms of teacher? How are these things are correlated with the student learning? This is one question. The second question is, are there any models that we can emulate? Right now, we do not have any examples. So we are again going to be in the process of doing this. We will again doing the research process, which is kind of searching for the elusive, treasure island or something. So are there any standard models that which we can? These are the two questions.
So two answers. First is, there was a study done in 2008 to 10 by Abul, Banerjee and ASER, working on evaluating a program that Pratham and Government of Bihar were doing together. And it was a very interesting 2-year project, randomized controlled trial. So, there was all appropriate high standards of research in it. What it showed is the same teachers and the same children were studied in 2 circumstances. One was during the school year. And during the school year, teacher training, this, that, and the other happened. There was a lot of child-centered work, but curriculum was not changed. It was still the grade level curriculum. And then in the summer of 2008, there was a big summer camp all over Bihar, where children from 3rd, 4th, 5th, if you look at the, wait one second, I just want to show you the, so children from 3rd, 4th, 5th are usually in schools organized by row, right? Std III is kind of age, whatever, 7, 8. Std V is age 9, 10. That's how all school systems are organized. But we can see that in our situation, in each of these rows, there is massive variation. So during the summer camp, this is what the teaching at the right level is. Take the same teachers, the same children, but instead of organizing the school by rows, you organize them by columns. Which means that, and if you look at the age distribution in these age grades, it's quite overlapping. So, it's not like you're putting very small children with very older children. In any case, in many of our schools, they sit in multi-grade classrooms. So the mixing up in India actually is quite fine because that's how it is. But what I do is instructionally, I work with the children who cannot recognize letters and work on very simple alphabet recognition skills. And for the children who are reading already somewhat, I give them a lot of reading practice. So it's the same teachers, same children, but organized differently. You saw a gain in learning in that 1 month, which was higher than the whole year. That's essentially what I was saying. And this has been done, this table that I showed you, this is last year in a few districts, exactly this was done with exactly similar results. All you do is you assess children using a very simple tool like ASER, figure out who's at what level, group them by level, not for the whole day, even for an hour or two a day, and teach them where they're at, and they move very quickly. And I'm not for the youngest children, but for children who are 8 and above, they are developmentally ready for, picking up things. So we don't have to go far. This has been done here. I'm thinking of asking Abhijit to fly down and meet, Big Boss and say, ki aap isko kar lo. Okay. Yeah, okay. Two more questions.
Yeah. I'm sorry, I think a mention of BTR would have been a good insight.
Yes.
Sorry. Yes. Because the ASER report which you talk about is, BTR is different. The Bunyadi BTR, which you are part of the whole show.
Yes.
I'm sure the contrasting which the figures would have been a very, very stark response. I mean, it would have been happy. I will be happy to see that.
Yeah.
Number two is that to my because they just fixed the presentation of the students yesterday only. Say 06 and 07, I don't know how many of you are online and those who are here. I mean, the level of presentation, madam has presented, the level of presentation is what you have done. You have a lot to learn from her. In terms of experience is different altogether. The way she presented cases, I have been trying to tell you the last 5 days. Professor Kritika and myself are trying to tell you how you should present yourself confidently and assertively at any point of time. Catch the audience by the eyes, little not by the neck, by the eyes. Okay. I mean, yeah, that's you cannot given a change, give you a chance to get sleep. I mean, you get the point. That's the way you should give the capture. Even a smaller subject, this is for her, my children, sorry. I'm not going to leave her. जब तक यहाँ से निकल जाता हम छोड़ते नहीं उनको. बचाओ, they will go into the day, बचाओ. But जब तक वो हम छोड़ते नहीं हैं. So it's a learning experience for them because I've been telling this, trying to tell. And thanks for making that experience. It was an experience learning for them. More for me. I mean, I don't know for them. I hope they listen to you and sing. Of course, when I sign off and I enjoy in the first class. Which you're planning.
No, but I think that I was going to mention BTR right at the end. I did not have time to bring out the data from this. So BTR, everybody knows BTR?
Yes.
What is BTR? Not Motiari. Best BTR. Right? What is BTR? Why BTR? So Gandhi spent, 2 years in BTR doing many important things. But the rest of his crew spent time trying to mobilize the villages and bring some level of health and education. And he had to bring in people from all over India because he wasn't getting the kind of cooperation. If you read his autobiography, there is a whole section on BTR. So DMI and Pratham have been working together in BTR for the last 2 years. This year I'm just calling a washout to see what needs to be done both inside the school and in the community to be able to change this picture. And my request was going to be that as soon as movement is possible, anybody who would like to come to BTR, we should go there and do a baseline now and see Rest of Bihar, whatever happens, we'll see. But at least in Bihar, some of the things that we are saying, we are hoping that these kinds of changes can happen there. If for nobody else, I feel we owe it to Gandhi to be able to show that लोग आगे बढ़ के चीजों को खुद से बदल सकते हैं. So I will definitely bring out the Bihar version of this and share it with everyone. But it would be great if there could be a small team. We are working in 13 villages. The Bunyadi Vidyalaya, of course, is in the center. There are GVK groups. It's a very good cross section. And we are right now doing a deep dive into some villages to see what has happened. Where are we at? Where should we begin? So thank you very much. And I look forward to continue. Okay, yes.
Sorry,
Yeah. No, I have lots of time. I'm just worried about whoever's coming after me.
Now, in one of the slides related to enrollment in class 8, you have mentioned that the boys, the dropout, the enrollment among the girls have increased compared to the boys. It is out of inquisitiveness I'm asking that whether any particular reason that the number is decreasing for the boys.
See, I don't know, but I think it could be private school. Nowadays, you have much larger enrollment of girls. So everybody is going to school. If you see greater proportion in school of girls, I just imagine the boys are in private school.
Well, I was thinking it might be because of their livelihood, they are moving into some skills or like.
Not yet. I think not yet, because there is so much entitlements you get by being in school that I think that has been one of the. But you see, there's a plateau and there's even a little decline in the last few years. So this dice bars, when they count for 21, it will be interesting to see who's there. Now, if you the Bunyadi Vidyalaya in Vidyalaya, for example, is totally dominated by girls because there's a Kasturba Gandhi Balika Vidyalaya next to it. And not only that, the girls are far smarter than the boys. So the boys have to sit at the back and the girls all sit in front and they control the class. I'm not saying that's ideal. I think I've heard a story, right or wrong, you know how stories are, that when the cycle distribution was happening, CM used to do a video conference with different districts. And there were 5 districts, and in those districts, children, the 8th standard children were speaking. And 3 districts में लड़कों ने कुछ बोला ही नहीं. At which point, apparently, he turned to his principal secretary and said, "लड़कों को भी cycle दे दो." Otherwise, ये लड़के पीछे रह जाएंगे. I don't know if that's true. I don't know if somebody made it up, but it's a story.
Thank you, ma'am.
Hi, one more question.
I was curious on knowing that, like you mentioned about regarding reading levels, mathematical ability, different aspects, on the basis of which we should actually teach them, say our students. Whether this is a problem of a teaching learning process or this is a problem of assessment that the, say, primary school teacher or grade 1 teacher did. Why a particular students who are not able to read a class 2 books has been passed to a class 3 grade, or 3 to the 4th grade, 4 to the 5th grade kind of thing. So this is a more of assessment problem than a process of a teaching learning and.
See, I think it's a combination of several things, and all policies are made with good intentions. So the not holding children back was कि लोगों को discourage नहीं करना चाहिए school से. कि अगर आपने किसी को fail कर दिया, he's 8 years old. I mean, it's really unfair. How can you fail when you're 8 years old? So let them keep going, but nobody said कि उसका assessment मत करो, उसको मदद मत करो. So that's, I think, one. Second is, our curriculum is what I would say is over ambitious. And it is fine for children who are going to Notre Dame and St. Michael's and who have educated parents at home. But probably if you have come into school too early, nobody helped you in first and second, so people, it's like a steep staircase. So you are going up physically, but you have not been helped in the kinds of things. So that's the second one. And third is, I think that we need to spend quite a lot of time with Jivika. One of the things we are doing is, जो Jivika Didi hai, does she know what is the learning level of the child? And it's taking 3-4 meetings and a lot of discussion for her to feel comfortable कि मैं अनपढ़ हूँ, but मैं अपने बच्चे की जांच कर सकती हूँ. It's not that she can't do it, but it requires quite a lot of confidence building. And once that happens, she goes to the school and says, मेरा बच्चा यहाँ क्यों है? आप क्या कर रहे हो? बहुत सारे JVR के districts में ट्यूशन बंद करा दिया, बेकार है मेरा पैसा जा रहा है, इसका तो improvement हो नहीं रहा. But it took time to bring them up to that level to understand. So creating the learning environment for parents who are not educated to engage in this process needs some investment. And just by giving entitlements, these things won't happen. वो तो सिर्फ वो अलग बात है ना, वो input आ रहा है. So I think it's a combination, but these are not insurmountable. These are not like low birth weight, dietary diversity. These are much more complicated things. This, I think, is just a focus, and it needs a campaign. We should get out of being very prescriptive and see how far you can go if everybody's, efforts can be put into it. Okay. Lots of people are standing up around here. So.
You made us wait. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for keeping us awake. Actually, it was needed. This symposium was intended to address the issues raised by you, and we just want to say thank you. You have touched the right buttons. With this, we respect a lot, and you have given us a direction for a new way of thinking. Thank you so much. Along with this, I would request our director to present a memento to have.